For generations, superheroes have been held up as an inspirational ideal, symbols of our own ability to transcend our limitations and realize our fullest potential. But for every moment of hope, there is one of doubt, a personal crisis that tears our self-image away and leaves us to face our own inner darkness. For many, this struggle is unending. It may break us, but it also gives us the opportunity to rise up, stronger than ever before. In 1980, legendary writer Denny O'Neil returned to Marvel Comics after a decade of revitalizing characters like Batman and Green Arrow for DC. The author would take on a number of assignments while at Marvel, including work on The Amazing Spider-Man and picking up Frank Miller's Daredevil, but one of his most impactful works for the company would be his 4-year stint on the Invincible Iron Man, alongside artist Luke McDonnell. Drawing from his experiences with addiction and recovery, O'Neil's run would fundamentally transform the armored Avenger, having the hero wage his greatest battle yet and turn his inner resilience into his greatest strength. By the 80s, Iron Man was at a crossroads. Created by Stan Lee, Don Heck, and Larry Lieber in 1963, the character was primarily a vehicle to explore the role of technology and industry in the Cold War. As a result, Iron Man would spend most of the 60s battling Vietnamese and Russian agents, a lot of whom were mired in pretty racist stereotypes. Creators like David Michelinie would push the character into the broader field of science fiction through stories like Doom Quest, which rules by the way. But Iron Man's Cold War ties would persist well into the 80s, something the politically conscious O'Neil took notice of when he arrived on the title.
My problem with Tony Stark, I hated the bastard,
recounted the writer.
There was not a lot to like about old Shellhead. He was an arms dealer, he was a capitalist, he was a technologist, and like a lot of hippie types, I did not trust technology. He was everything I think is rotten with this country.
To a staunch anti-war activist like O'Neil, Tony Stark was practically alien, steeped in pro-war arrogance, and aside from an injury that was removed in his earlier years, completely insulated by his privilege and status. There was, however, one link that the writer and the character shared. Stark, like O'Neil, was a recovering alcoholic. This facet of the character had been established a year prior through David Michelinie and Bob Layton's Demon in a Bottle, which saw Stark fall into addiction under the weight of mounting pressures in his life. The storyline was critically praised, and even won an Eagle Award in 1980 for bringing some much-needed humanity to the character, but it was also criticized by many for its open-and-shut approach, treating alcoholism as an inconvenience to be swatted away over 22 pages. O'Neil, who had entered recovery himself a decade earlier, saw this as the opportunity to catalyze an all-new journey for the Armored Avenger, having Stark confront his own humanity and face the reality of his addiction. But before doing that, the writer had to tear down the resilient image of Iron Man, piece by piece. O'Neil's run begins in a fairly episodic fashion, with 5 issues following Iron Man as he teams up with his fellow heroes, fights villains like the Serpent Society, and solves high-tech problems with his trademark wits and ingenuity. While these initial stories may seem completely unrelated, the writer uses each to build and enhance a through line for the character. While the Iron Man is merely a tool, Stark has slowly made it into a crutch, becoming dependent on the feeling of invincibility it's given him. O'Neil would further this unraveling of the character through a new arch-nemesis, the brilliant criminal mastermind Obadiah Stane. A ruthless manipulator driven by conquest, Stane spends most of the run's first arc orchestrating the destruction of Stark's life, exhausting him with a gauntlet of supervillains, undermining his business, and destroying his relationships, all in a bid to take over Stark International. And while the stoic will shown in Demon in a Bottle carries the hero through most of these challenges, Stane's gauntlet leaves Stark completely disillusioned in himself. The Invincible Iron Man is no more.
An empty shell.
For From this initial relapse, O'Neill would spend the next year furthering Stark's descent into addiction as he drove away his friends, lost his money, and eventually ended up homeless on the streets of New York. In place of Demon in a Bottle's brief fall and return to normal, O'Neill's slow burn story would take Stark to a dark place, plunging the hero into an ugly, indifferent world brought forth through Luke McDonnell's expressive artwork. In place of the more classically heroic imagery of series mainstay Bob Layton, McDonnell used Iron Man to pioneer an approach that would become famous in his later tenure working on DC's Suicide Squad. Bold, heavy shadows, overwrought expressions, and minimal backgrounds to emphasize characters and bring a sobering drama to the hero's dire situation. To the book's ongoing readers, this approach was a breath of fresh air, finally giving a lasting sense of vulnerability and humanity to a fairly stagnant character. Marvel's executives, however, weren't happy, and demanded a more traditional version of the hero for events like the upcoming Secret Wars. O'Neill and editor Mark Gruenwald would find a compromise between these visions through an all-new Iron Man, moving longtime supporting character Jim Rhodes into the armor, and setting his rise as the hero against Stark's agonizing road back. These two paths would finally cross in issue number 182, where after friend and recovering addict Gretel Anders dies in childbirth, Stark finally gathers the strength to start his journey back to recovery.
I've been killing myself for years. That's not news, but I'm going to stop.
That's great, Tony. Really great.
Rhodey, I realized something that night. In my own way, I'm as helpless and scared and ignorant as the baby. I need help, just like he did.
Coming after 2 years of hardship, O'Neill and McDonnell would end their first major arc having completely revolutionized Iron Man, passing the mantle to a new generation while sending Tony Stark on a new path of his own. This, however, would only be the first of many changes to come. Since arriving in the pages of Tales of Suspense, Tony Stark and the Iron Man have shared an unbreakable bond, with the armored Avenger serving as Stark's idealized vision of what he'd like to become: selfless, resilient, and impervious to harm. But following Stark's self-destruction and recovery, O'Neill quickly began developing a new take on the hero through a new Iron Man, Jim Rhodes. First appearing in Iron Man number 118, Rhodey was usually seen as part of the larger ensemble seen in Stark Industries, a collection of employees that helped show Stark's more human side. However, with the hero distancing himself from the armor to aid his recovery, O'Neill and Gruenwald took the opportunity to elevate Rhodes to co-lead, retitling the book as the all-new Iron Man. In sharp contrast to Stark's swaggering, carefree, even privileged demeanor, Rhodes brought a more grounded sense of wonder to Iron Man's massive adventures, fighting Stark's deadliest enemies while trying to cover his rent and grow into his new role, all while bringing a snarkier, more pointed energy to the hero's encounters.
I love it when the bad guys try to hurt me. Yeah, I eat this stuff up with a spoon. Go ahead. Be dumb enough to hit me.
I'd rather not.
Rhodes even took part in Marvel's publisher-wide crossover Secret Wars, where the newcomer was put on the cosmic stage alongside all of Marvel's big-name heroes. It should be said that for an industry plagued by resistance to substantial changes, fans were quick to embrace Rhodey as Iron Man, with many relaying their excitement in the book's letter pages. However, O'Neill had also begun seeding an arc for Rhodes after Secret Wars, with the swashbuckling sci-fi adventures of the early run giving way to a more grounded, introspective story. With both leads reaching a turning point in their arcs, O'Neill catalyzed another shakeup, having Rhodes, supporting members Morley and Cly Irwin, and a newly sober Stark move across the country to forge a new company in California. Initially set up as a return to form for the title, the story steadily begins to play with readers' expectations, using both leads' journeys to inform a new sense of rivalry between Stark and Rhodes.
I'm into the hero tropes these days. If I were to write that down someplace, so you remember it.
Sure.
There I go again, mouthing off to my best friend, the man who made me what I am today. You're all class, Mr. Rhodes.
While admittedly a bit melodramatic, this tension is all in the service of O'Neill's through line for the series. How addiction, whether literal or metaphorical, can isolate you from the people trying to help. Much like Stark's fall at the start of the run, the writer uses the episodic nature of the series to give Rhodey a fall of his own, as the mounting stress of hero life enables his own dependence on his alter ego, until a minor loss sends Rhodey on a rampage through California. Having run out of options, O'Neill finally has Stark suit up as Iron Man again, confronting the root of his own addiction to save his friend from a similar fate. But instead of the standard superhero brawl, O'Neill delivers a moment more reminiscent of an intervention between friends, with both heroes admitting their faults and coming together to shoulder the burden of Iron Man.
I'm not your enemy. I don't know why you think I am.
Because you want to take the only thing that means everything to me. Ever since I was a little kid, all I ever thought about was being a hero. That's why I enlisted in the Army, why I went to flight school, why I volunteered for the Army. Finally, I make it. Pick up the whole package. Hero? Forget that. I'm a superhero. Now, it's gonna be all gone.
Rhodey, I know a bit of what it's like to need something and not have it. There. I've undone the damage. You can move. Whatever you want to do, do it. I won't stop you. I can't stop you. I don't think you'll hurt me.
If the majority of O'Neill's tenure is an exploration of addiction and self-destruction, then his third act on Iron Man is a euphoric victory over what came before, seeing Stark and Rhodes move past their darkest impulses to come back stronger than ever. But to the writer, triumph over addiction isn't something that comes easily. Rather, it's earned and maintained through self-actualization. Almost immediately, O'Neill puts his two leads on parallel journeys of self-discovery, with Stark reuniting with his teammates in the Avengers, and Rhodes confronting his insecurities through a vision quest alongside the mystical hero Shaman. While each character comes to their own epiphany, both build on O'Neill's central thesis for the title, that both heroes are more than the armor they wear. Rhodes, finally free of Stark's shadow, returns to the role with a newfound optimism, while Stark realizes that, like his addiction, the burden of Iron Man is something he can and must continue to live with. It's this realization that O'Neill uses to catalyze the run's deadly climax, heralded by the return of Obadiah Stane, now hell-bent on his mission to destroy Stark and his allies. Enraged that the hero survived his destruction, issues 197 through 199 see Stane use everything at his disposal to tear Stark back down, kidnapping his friends, discrediting his image, and attacking the team's headquarters in a bombing that leaves Morley dead and Stark guilt-ridden. In a way, O'Neill even uses Stane's backstory to frame him as a mirror to Stark and Rhodes, establishing Stane as a man wholly consumed with an addiction to dominating others, shown through his own twisted inversion of the Iron Man, the deadly Ironmonger. But instead of another fall from grace, the arc's climax in issue number 200 sees Stark return as Iron Man more determined than ever to right the wrongs of the past, given a more classically heroic look through Mark Bright's pencils, and clad in a look that would become synonymous with the character's rebirth. What follows is almost page after page of pure catharsis, with Stark dismantling Stane's plans, tearing through the Ironmonger with ease, and standing firm against his addiction, while Stane ultimately gives in to his own self-destruction.
What happened?
Somebody lost.
O'Neill would continue working on Iron Man through issue 208 before being replaced by Danny Fingeroff, who immediately began efforts to return the character to form, reinstating Stark's CEO status and ditching the more grounded approach for the swashbuckling adventures of Michelini and Layton, who would also return to the book soon after. Still, despite its lack of recognition over the years, O'Neill's tenure would leave a lasting legacy on Iron Man, making Stark's struggles with addiction and recovery as integral as his desire to build a better future.
There are people who think that heroes should never have serious flaws,
recounts O'Neill.
I don't think they should be jerks. I mean, the word hero is from the Greek to serve and protect, and I think that has to be an element of it. But having a guy overcome something like an addiction or a terrible flaw seems to me to enhance his heroism. It comes down to a question of who the man inside the suit really is, and it doesn't matter if the suit comes from a subterranean laboratory or Brooks Brothers.
Much like the never-ending, serialized nature of comics, Tony Stark will always continue to battle his personal demons. And while he may stumble or fall, sometimes harder than ever, it's his ability to endure, to rise above these struggles, that makes him truly invincible. Hey everyone, thanks so much for checking out my video on Denny O'Neill's Iron Man. This was one of the first runs I ever read for the character, and it's one I find myself coming back to more and more over the years. It's not huge, it's not cosmic, but it's an incredibly moving, human story, and that's something I'd love to see more of in the future. If you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Every little bit helps the channel out a lot. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Dom DeFelice and my patrons, who are helping me grow this channel and continue doing what I love, and hopefully what you love too. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay resilient.